Organizations and their leaders are under more pressure than ever to keep up with the pace of business, digitally transform, grow the enterprise, and do all of this in the age of uncertainty. That's why organizations are learning how to transform talent, adopting a hybrid workforce, combining full-time employee team members with on-demand talent, freelancers like you find on Upwork. But to do this effectively, organizations need access to deep talent pools and an enterprise-ready suite to give them a way to scale up and scale down as they need it. Our panel today involves people on both sides of the table, business clients and freelancers, as well as what we call teams, formerly known as virtual agencies. Our panelists today have come to us from around the world, which will be part of our discussion. I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, I'd like to introduce Adrienne Young. She is the lead art director at Amway. Next, I'd like to introduce Ben Tyson. He is the co-founder of Hoozens. And finally, I want to introduce Austin Devine, video production specialist. Everybody, please start by introducing yourselves. We'll start with you, Adrienne.
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here. My name's Adrienne, and I'm the creative lead for Amway Global Marketing. And so I do everything from ensure consistency and brand standards for our Amway brand, and I lead photography direction and video direction, and I help with our social content. So everything creative to ensure brand consistency from Amway perspective, that's what I do.
Wonderful. And I hope when you watch this back later, you feel like we've done a good job setting up this video execution. It's great to have you here, Adrienne. Yeah. Austin, you're going next. I bet you thought you were third. I just want to keep you on your toes, Austin. Next, tell us a little bit about yourself.
What's up, everybody? My name is Austin Devine. I am a freelance filmmaker and photographer based in Bangkok, and I was in charge of the video production on the ground here in Thailand.
Ben, yes. Finally to you, tell us a little bit about yourself and Hoozens.
So hello, everyone. I'm Ben Tyson. I'm the co-founder of a small video agency. We're based in Portland, Oregon, called Hoozens. And in that, right, so I look after clients and business development and creative strategy and shooting video and photography and a ton of post-production.
Great. Well, all three of you, it's a pleasure to have you here. Well, let's get started. Adrienne, I want to start with you. Taking a step back, when you look at the workforce that you manage today, which is truly hybrid, how has it changed? In other words, how has it transformed for you over the last few years?
Yeah, I think I speak for a lot of people and creatives, especially when I say that COVID has really changed the way that we work and approach creative productions. So yeah, for me at the beginning of 2020, I was tasked specifically with this, this global production that we had to pull off. Amway is a global company. We're located in over 100 countries and territories globally. And in order to get that global representation for our brand, in order to pull that off, especially in the midst of a pandemic, we had to really rethink the way that we went into productions and the way that we built teams and the way that we engaged with agencies. So for me, I really knew that we needed to approach creative differently at the beginning of 2020. So we knew that the pandemic was ramping up and we knew that we really needed that global representation. So for Amway, our global headquarters, they're located in West Michigan, but some of our biggest markets are actually located in Asia and all across the world in different continents. And so typically one of the challenges that we find is that sometimes when you do creative, even with, in big cities like New York or Chicago, with big agencies there, the creative would still tend to skew Western. And because we're such a global company, we needed that true representation across the gamut. So for us, Upwork was a great solution because we knew we could tap into talent globally, and we could really truly build that hybrid team of people across the world. So, and we didn't need to physically be present. That was another huge thing. So from my home office, not even the world headquarters, from my small home office / guest bedroom, how do we pull off global photo and video shoots? So Upwork really came in and helped us to pull that off when it seemed like a huge undertaking at the time. And there's so many uncertainties. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. And I remember the first time I worked with Amway, this is probably 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago. I've been to that Grand Rapids airport many times. I can only imagine trying to deploy a video production team from there to go to All Points West, or in this case, All Points East. So I think that's a great use case for everybody watching about how we shrink the footprint of the globe with a global workforce. I want to take a step back. So Adrian, where did this all start? I want you to put us in a moment in time when you realized, I've got to reach out to Upwork. We've absolutely got to solve this problem.
yeah, so just to give a little background on Amway. So sometimes what we say is our special sauce is our Amway business owners. So those are the unique business owners that are on the ground, that are selling the products, that are building their business. And they're truly what helps us to, grow and become the largest direct selling company in the world. And we knew we needed to showcase the stories of our business owners globally. That was a charge that was led by our CMO. And he was wondering, from global marketing, how do we tell these stories? And how do we do so in our 5 major markets, which happen to be Brazil, Russia, Thailand, India, and China? And also I should add that my budget was relatively small by comparison to some of our product brands. So I had this relatively small budget. I was tasked with going into these 5 major markets that were not located anywhere near me and figuring out, how do we represent these Amway business owners that are truly amazing examples of great storytelling and people that are really modernizing the way that they run their Amway business. And for me, I was totally overwhelmed, I'll admit. And one of my colleagues came to me and said, we have this new platform that's available to us. It's called Upwork. You can tap into talent globally. You can find every type of entrepreneurial skill that you could ever want. Let's start there. And I feel like our company is in the perfect place right now because they're really encouraging us to don't be afraid to fail, to try something new, and to think about the way you approach projects differently. And so it was like kind of the perfect storm, I would say. So the pandemic is ramping up. We knew we needed these global stories. And we had Upwork had just been available to us from a corporate perspective. So that's when we came to Upwork and we worked with some account reps to say, how do we get started? How do we even position this project? What is the type of talent that we're looking for on the platform? And they really helped us to, we went through our creative brief and they broke it down and they said, you could really benefit from probably an executive producer and some creative support. And then you'll need videographers on the ground in the markets. And from there, it started to shape up into an actual project for me where I was like, okay, I can see us pulling this off. And I don't even have to leave my office. And that's around the time where I first met Ben. And after I met Ben, I had a lot more confidence that we could pull this off logistically.
Behind me, you see a rocket. It's a little toy rocket from the movie Toy Story. And I think a lot about this rocket scientist thinking. A first principle says, don't be afraid to fail. It's part of the first principles process. Sounds like you had that mentality, which means you could explore something new. And in this case, it was a new workforce to execute a really big idea, if you will, a moonshot for Amway to have this global video storytelling narrative. So I think that as you went on that journey, you had to learn a little bit. Just talk about your first experience. You say it was locating and engaging Ben. Just talk a little bit about how you use the platform and how you learned a lot through the experience, say, of bringing on Ben and then subsequently some videographers.
Yeah, I will say that the Upwork team that we work with, our executive account representatives, they really helped us to digest the creative brief and break it down into a project description to attract the right talent on the platform. And that's where, the executive producer role was brought up. So they knew logistically it was going to be really complex to have all of these video shoots and photo shoots in different markets, in different countries, different languages. And in order to ensure creative consistency and to pull off a logistics of shoots across the world with our Amway business owners who aren't actually professional talent, they're real people. And so I would say that executive account reps from Upwork, they helped us to write that project description And that was how we were in touch with Ben and Hoosens. And then we had our first interview with him, and we got to know him better, where we kind of were able to gauge, have you done this type of work before? Is this intimidating to you? The fact that we have, 5 different markets to potentially engage with, and that we have to find 5 different videographers, but ensure consistency in all of the finished assets. So after talking to Ben, it was very clear that he had experience that lined up with the approach to the project, and he was able to help us, figure out how do we get it going? How do we get it going quickly? And he wasn't intimidated at all. He kind of jumped right in, helped us to get started.
He doesn't seem the type that would be easily intimidated by such a challenge. But I just want to stop for a second and talk about this creative brief. For everybody watching, it's so important to be able to create a prototype, if you will, even if it's just verbal, like a creative brief of what you're looking for. Or as Louis Pasteur often said, luck favors the prepared mind. Ben, it's time to talk to you a little bit. So talk about your discoverability, if you will. I just want to start with this. So obviously, Adrian found you. Talk a little bit about what you do and what Hoosens does to make yourself more discoverable on the Upwork platform.
Sure, a couple of things. So we've had the good fortune. We had been working through Upwork with another customer in the year prior, and we had a couple of great animated projects. We did kind of a whole post-COVID strategy or COVID strategy animated work for a company, and as part of that, I got to know a couple of people at Upwork who started talking to me, and I might screw up the name here, but I think it's called like the Premium Talent, the Upwork Talent Group or something like that. And so I had several conversations with them, just sort of like deep dive into who we are, what we do, really a lot of philosophy, sort of like how we work. And I think as a result of that, when Adrian had this brief, which was really well written, and you can tell on our side, right? When you get something that's just like someone throws something over the wall, it's like, it's hard to respond to, it's hard to get specific with budget. We got a really cool invitation. We didn't even know it was Amway at this time. It was sort of, I don't think the company name was in the brief. We responded to that brief. So I think it was, in my case, I had pretty early realized like, oh, these people at Upwork are actually pretty smart. And, I spend a ton of time trying to develop our business and grow our clients. We're pretty new. We're like 18 months old at this point. So we're still in that initial, like trying to sign clients phase. And, so I think those conversations with a couple of really smart folks at Upwork ultimately connected the dots here between, Adrian's brief and us.
Quick follow-up. What goes into a great creative brief? Because you're on the receiving side of it. And this, even though you're 18 months in on Upwork, this isn't your first corporate rodeo. Talk to me about like, what's the difference between a really good creative brief, this is for our viewers, and a creative brief that's just a little bit too general to either price or scope? Yeah,
sure. So like the number one thing that people do that just baffles me when it's missing from so many briefs is like, what's the point here? Like, what's the objective? I spent some time in like a kind of a Hollywood career, and every script has a log line, and a brief without a log line or a headline is really tough to sift through. And so I think that's the first thing of like, really just hit it over the head. This is what we're trying to do here. We're trying to tell stories about 5 ABOs in Adrian's case. But then also a degree of specificity and a willingness to share, I think is really important. I think when you think about a bad brief, it's often sort of like a thing upon a thing, and you can tell there's sort of multiple people all sort of piling in, and then there's someone in charge of putting the actual, document together. And then, you sort of see it on our end. I'm sure Austin sees this too. And it's like, what we want to do is be able to come back with a creative take and a budget take and a scope take in the first round, and then start to have questions. So I think specificity is really, really important. And then also sharing Yeah, also sharing prior work, like, hey, we did this at Amway and we love this, or check out our social channels. That's great in terms of getting our heads in the zone.
Absolutely, because it gives you a starting point. One of the things that you point out, though, is your Hollywood experience. So I always think about this fundamental question that any actor should walk in and ask, and that's, what's my motivation? So it sounds like Amway did a good job at letting you know what the end goal of the project is. So thanks for unpacking that for us. Austin, we're bringing you into the conversation. Talk a little bit about how you got connected with Ben and Adrian.
Yeah, so I was first connected with Ben and Sean. They contacted me regarding this project. The specifics were very kind of vague at first, but then we hopped on a couple video chats, I think maybe 2 or 3, and I really got to understand the project a little bit more. I understood it was Amway. And at this time, they still hadn't chosen to work with me, but I really wanted to work with them, and they decided to move forward with me. And then after that, I was connected with Adrian and the Amway business owner here, and the rest of the team.
Gotcha. So what do you do on the Upwork platform to make it easier for potential clients to discover you?
That's a good question. I do a good job and I get good reviews. To start on Upwork was actually fairly difficult because it's a very competitive platform. So when I started out, I was taking jobs that were not necessarily what I would usually jump to excitement about. But I would take them because I was confident that I could do them well and build up a reputation on the platform that would then give me the opportunity to work with clients that I wanted to.
Yeah. Now you're in Bangkok. Talk to me about the time difference. What's the time difference between, say, Grand Rapids, Michigan, that's East Coast, I believe, and Eastern time zone, and Bangkok? What's that time difference?
So I believe it's 12 hours, and I think it's 14 hours with Ben.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Now, this is an important discussion, and we're going to start with you, Austin, because we're talking to you about this now. How do you solve for those kind of time zone differences? It's literally night and day. How do you solve for that problem? Ben, Adrian, be on your toes. I'm coming to you next with the same question.
So nowadays, it's not so difficult, actually. There's so many good ways to stay connected with people overseas. However, one thing that stands out is originally we had a ton of time, right? From the time that I was being interviewed to the time that we actually started production, I think was around 2 months. So this was extremely helpful, right? Because we have a lot of planning to do. We go back and forth with ideas. So having ample time was something that I think definitely helped this project be successful. Obviously, there were some late nights for me and some early mornings for them, where we were connecting originally just to get a sense of each other and make sure we were a good fit to work together. But after that, we switched to email and to WhatsApp texting, actually, which I preferred. It was immediate. It was just a much smoother process than staying up late and hopping on a video chat. Furthermore, Ben actually, I think it was Ben, put together a really awesome production packet for me that was not only visually appealing, but had so much good information in it that I could have probably just done the whole production with just that packet.
Wow. So let's unpack that, because you offered 3 solutions for working across time zones. Solution 1 is schedule padding. Now, this was an important point you make. I've worked across time zones a lot in my previous roles, say at Yahoo or as a consultant. When you've got a lot of time in your schedule, it's not a big deal for it to take a day for the next answer to come from one of your partners across the globe. When your schedule's tighter, though, and you don't have that padding, the time difference can be more acute. The second thing you talked about was flexibility. In other words, you're willing to stay up late like you're doing now. We're willing to get up early like I'm doing right now. And so that flexibility to adjust to the other is really important. But the third one that you touched on, and I'm coming to you on this one in a second here, Ben, is asynchronous collaboration, right? So you moved from real-time collaboration, which requires flexibility, to an asynchronous method via email, or in this case, WhatsApp texting. And then you were able to really land on that production packet. Those are the three things for everybody watching. Pad your schedule, be flexible, work offline. That, I think, is a really good set of advice points. Ben, to you, I want to start with this creative packet. Talk a little bit about what you put together, what your intentions were, and how that really helps a guy like Austin working out of Bangkok be successful, regardless of the time zones.
Yeah, sure. I think that, one of the key elements and aspects of the project is that, we wanted to allow, we're telling, I think, 5 individual stories here in 5 different countries around the world, but we also have a global brand with standards of quality, with standards in terms of claims people may make about product, and also the experience in these local markets, like in Bangkok, where Austin is, for the talent, like the Amway ABO, and the filmmaker has to be great. And so how do you sort of take all of that, wrap it up? And also we had a pretty specific and ambitious visual style that we were going for. We wanted these types of photographs, these types of shots. So we put together, and this is something that I've been doing for a while in prior roles of mine too, is, this idea of how do we create a production pack that's sort of a guideline that someone, knowing a lot of people like Austin around the world, how do we send something to Austin that sort of inspires the right questions, inspires the right thoughts, sort of gets their head in the game, for lack of a better phrase, in terms of how they're going to shoot this, how they're going to approach this, and ultimately to get Austin and his team members to really care about telling the story, right? It's not we're not just hiring a crew, we're hiring the best crew. And we're not just shooting, we're not just hiring a videographer to capture some content like you might do at sports or something like that. This is a nuanced story. And so by providing a ton of pretty specific visual references and techniques for everything, but without limiting it, it's not a specific shot list of you must do this, this, and this, because creatively that's sort of, that's just as challenging for someone who's super creative, is to tell them exactly what to do. So we brought Austin into the project. We all brought Austin into the project because we looked at his work. We also looked at his reviews on Upwork, which were awesome and were a big factor in our decision, by the way, to come back to that point. But he gets the visuals. And so how do we make sure that those same visuals that we saw in all of his other work will get in this project? And so, yeah.
So there's a through line here, right? So the client gives you a very specific project brief that allows you to scope and price the work, get engaged. You give Austin a very helpful and motivating project packet, but it's not too specific. So it's not exactly the same discipline as the project brief. For those of you watching, I really think that's an important takeaway. Adrian, bringing you into the conversation. So you got a hybrid team. It's a combination of full-time team members, independent partners. What did you have to do internally to support this team?
Yes, like I mentioned at the beginning, right now, I would say our company is making strides to encourage us to figure out new ways of thinking when it comes to approaching creative projects, and again, not being afraid to fail. So that was one of the perks when I went into this, is I felt with such a complex project, and this being my first major project with Upwork, there's really nothing to lose. There's only anything to gain. And I'll be honest, I went in with kind of low expectations, knowing how complex the project was and how we would pull it off, and how kind of low of a budget we had comparatively to other groups in our marketing division. But I will say that when the first video came out, the work spoke for itself internally. And as soon as people were seeing this video that we came up with, is specifically the video in Brazil, And it was starting to be circulated just on its own internally throughout the company. And our CEO wanted to play it at an employee meeting. So it really got out there and it kind of took off like wildfire. And everyone was like, where did this video come from? We need to be doing more of this. What was the budget for this? You know, they wanted to dive in and figure out, how did you pull this off? And so the work really spoke for itself. And then I got invited to multiple meetings where they were like, tell us how you did it. Tell us how you approached the project and how you found the talent and how you accomplished this from Michigan, you know. So I would say that the work, because it was such high caliber and it was something like we hadn't really ever been able to pull off before from an authenticity standpoint and from quality, and it just really elevated the way that we talk about our Amway business through the lens of the ABOs. And it really showed that storytelling is a great way of marketing, especially when it comes across as authentic storytelling and not scripted. And it's not the voice of the company, it's the voice of the Amway business owner. So yeah, all of that it came together to really prove its worth internally.
Lead with the work. I think that's really important. And for those of you watching, if you find success through the Upwork platform and it's not only a beautiful product, but also surprisingly affordable, spreading that around, being available to collaborate across the organization, it helps the whole of the company begin to build this new hybrid agile workforce. So thank you very much for doing that. We are entering the lightning round. Now, all three of you, here's what I mean. I'm going to ask you all a question, and I just want you to just kind of go bullet point with me. Tell me quickly, 1, 2, 3. Okay, Ben, I'm going to start with you. You seem up for the challenge. Ben,
Right.
Bullet points here, my friend. What advice would you give other freelancers about being successful with business clients?
It's so much about communication, I think, ultimately. I think, even when you're a freelancer on a platform at arm's length, even though we're compressing those distances these days, you have to be highly communicative. You have to sort of be responsive, available, Austin, at odd times. You sort of have to do whatever it takes to develop that relationship, however unconventionally it sort of started. Maybe it's not face-to-face, I guess is what I mean. Communicate. That's the key.
That's it. That's the first and second and third answer. Austin, I'm to you. What advice would you offer clients and talent for both sides of the table for working together in this new hybrid world?
Yeah, going on what Ben said, communication is really key. It's what's going to be the make or break it if your project will be successful. And I think it's really important to build a team, and I mean like human communication and just being, friends and humans to each other. I think that gets lost easily with just text messaging or, not taking the time to meet up and chat for 20 minutes.
Yeah, I love that. Dale Carnegie once wrote, "You will accomplish more developing an interest in other people than you will ever accomplish trying to get people interested in you." So you've really underscored this idea that it's not just communication like words on a screen or words over a Zoom. It's that connection. It's that caring not only about the project or in this case, the outcome, but it's the other person. Adrian, we're going to finish this lightning round with you. What advice would you give other business clients, business managers that are watching this broadcast about how you can be successful working with independent talents like Ben and Austin?
I think it starts with making sure you have a very clear brief and you know what you want and you know what talent you're looking for. And I think when those things marry up, that's when the greatness happens. So if you really understand what you're looking for and you know who you're looking for and you see the work that they've done and it kind of speaks for itself and you get the right team together, that's when you can do great work. So if you get the wrong talent for the wrong brief, that's when things can fall apart. So I think, that would be my answer.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This has been a great discussion. So many takeaways. We've been talking to Adrian Young, lead art director at Amway, Ben Tyson, co-founder at Houzens, Austin Devine, independent professional, video production specialist operating out of Bangkok, but willing to get up early or stay up late. Adrian, Ben, Austin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.